Trish Stratus and Lita main eventing Raw as the first ever women to main event it without a superstar, without a guy involved, and well, not a tag team match, not a intergender match, not a mixed tag team match. It was two women going at it in a singles match for the women's title on December 6th, 2004. This match was pretty impactful, like because at the time there was no such the concept of a woman main eventing Raw. Women main eventing Raw was kind of unheard of. Like no one ever thought that would happen. Like everyone just looked at them and said they're great athletes, they're great lookers, but come on, main eventing Raw. WWE management will never allow that, and they allowed that. I was on a huge hiatus at this point. Like after The Rock and Steve Austin had left, I just kind of lost interest in WWE. Probably should have looked back on that and realized that was a huge mistake. And I kind of missed most of the Ruthless Aggression era. Like I came back around 2005, maybe 6, when ECW was starting to come back, sort of. Anyways, so so in preparation of watching the match to relive it again, from the old days on the WWE Network and on YouTube, I also watched the documentary featuring talking about Lita and Trish Stratus' rivalry, and now they're best friends in real life. And I was really glad that they really focused on this. Like, it would have been more memorable if it came out around WrestleMania so they could call them women instead of divas, but what are you going to do? But I really wanted to build up anticipation for this. So after I watched that, I watched the match, and just seeing what happened in that match was absolute gold. Like, okay, I'll complain that it was only 7 minutes long, but come on, like, considering what we have now, yeah, I'm surprised. Like nowadays, you would expect like, oh, 7 minutes. That's a blessing. Back then, that was a blessing. Whereas what happened a few years ago before the women's revolution happened, was that well, you got like maybe 5 minutes at best, but that's not really what the main focus is to an extent. Now women can last just as much as men in the ring and can go as long as men in the ring and steal the show. But Lita and Trish, like you will never ever find another rivalry like them. Like like every time when they got in the ring, like they got in the ring so many times on Raw, on SmackDown, and I think sometimes on Sunday Night Heat back when WWE actually cared about their C-level shows and wanted to push them as A-level shows or B-level shows. And then SmackDown was also important until the brand split returned this year. But anyways, they like you would always like, oh, they're just doing the match again. Oh, we've seen this match before. It's either gonna be one of them. Blah 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 blah. We've seen this a dozen times, but they always add something different to it. You know, something that Randy Orton and John Cena lacked. Whereas if this was to be happening today, the match would still be great, but the storyline, yeah, if they still kept going at this time, they probably would be misbooked and whatnot. But anyways, like this match was actually pretty great. Like for the amount of time they were given on the main event slot, it was really great. Um, the most memorable moment in the match is when Lita does a suicide dive and nearly breaks her neck in the process when her neck bends, and I was like, ugh. Even though it's been 12 years, it was cringing to just see this. Like I was looking up to see, wait, did Lita injure herself in that match? And it turns out she didn't injure herself. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, like the match kept going. Like I thought for sure the referee would have stopped it there, but well, yeah, but and that would have been a huge disaster and would have set women wrestling back because then management would think that, well, these women that one got injured in this match, so I don't think they can hang with them because Kevin Dunn will look for any fucking excuse in order to backtrack everything. I don't know if Kevin Dunn was still insane as he is now, as he was if he was back then, or he was still somewhat competent. But I digress. This match was pretty entertaining. Like, Trish Stratus was mostly faking this nose injury she got from Survivor Series after a brutal beatdown that Lita delivered after a disqualification. And then she hit her in the head with the mask that she wore, and, well, that happened. And they were building this up, like to an extent. Like, they built this up, like, Lita giving her the kiss of death on the cheek, and Trish Stratus would eventually lose the match, so the kiss of death prophecy came true. But, like, the match isn't remembered for the quality, like, even though the match is good, but it's remembered for the impact it made. Like I said, there at that time there was no such thing as a woman main eventing the show unless they had a man involved. But now they did it. Like, everyone and the crowd was active. Like, though back then the crowd was really active a lot, and not today's audience. But anyways, like, they went ahead and were told, okay, go out there, do whatever. Like, okay, you have this limited timing, but still, go out there and just do it best you can. Like, it seemed WWE management was willing to take more risks than they are nowadays. Oh, wait, that's all the time. That was back then. All the good days when they would, let's take a risk here. So, Lita became women's champion, and the crowd in her hometown was popping with excitement, like, yeah, our hometown girl, she just won the big one for us. And that title reign lasted a month. Yeah, when I was watching the episode documentary about this, they said that the original plan was for Lita to win that match at New Year's Revolution pay-per-view and go on to have a long reign and have Trish Stratus go after her, which probably would have led to a WrestleMania match between the two, which would have been awesome. Because if you count WrestleMania 18, Trish and Lita never had that WrestleMania match together. They never had that match. And that would have been awesome. And they would have made it work, even back then. And that's kind of a tragedy on that, because it would have been awesome. But Lita got injured, unfortunately, and had to be gone for a while. And then 2 years after this big main event match, they retired. In a month or two between each other. So yeah, like, that was sad. Like, they were still pretty young at that point, and they could have gone on for a lot longer. But okay, if I was to rank all the Lita Trish Stratus matches, I would say this is their second best. I mean, like, the first best is Lita versus Trish Stratus at Unforgiven in their final encounter, because they were allowed to go on for over 11 minutes, which was unheard of even back then. And this was also Trish Stratus' final match, as she would win the Women's Championship for the final time. While number two, it's this one because it was impactful, and because it made a statement that the women are here. We're going to establish ourselves as just as great as the men. And after Trish and Lita left, the women's division kind of floundered for a bit. Like, they just lost their two leading revolutionary leaders, and it felt like things were going back to the way they were, where WWE just looked at them and said, oh, they're just sex symbols. We need sex appeal. And while they had Mickie James, they had Victoria, they had Ivory, they had, to an extent, Jazz, it wasn't. You just felt like Lita and Trish, it's missing something. And then the PG era happened, and we all know how that turned out. And then, because since WWE told them, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do any of this, you need to just go out there and do something stupid. And under 3 minutes. Yeah, there was something seriously questionable going on. And then the women's revolution happened. And 12 years after this match, after the Lita Trish Stratus match on Raw, we had Charlotte versus Sasha Banks main event Raw, and then ultimately would a few weeks later go on to main event Hell in a Cell, which Vince McMahon was heavily against. and Triple H, the creative, and most of the superstars, and all the fans that were petitioning that this needs to happen, happened. So it was so great to see how, like, I kept, every time when a woman wrestling match would main event a show, like NXT had done, though WWE will not count that because they have a bitterness, the main roster has a bitterness towards NXT, or Kevin Dunn specifically, because of his discrimination policies or attitude. Um, I would say in the comments on Bleacher Report and to myself, like, Trish and Lita would be so proud. And yes, I know they're not dead; they're alive and well. But I'm pretty sure they'd be proud seeing the women finally be given these opportunities to really go as much as the two women back then did. But now they have more opportunities to go out longer, like the first ever Iron Woman match, the first ever Hell in a Cell woman match. Like, yeah, there's a lot to be said here. And though the odds of main eventing WrestleMania still seem slim for a long time now, it would be interesting if that did happen with Sasha Banks and Bayley and the rest of the four horsewomen, because that's the only match I think that could main event WrestleMania and be a women's match. But anyways, and this video probably went on longer than the match. I'm just gonna say that out there. So I think I'll just end it here. This was Neo Reality Entertainment. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and donate. Stay tuned for more.